legislature as it pertains to Dr. York's incarceration and his freedom.
Right.
I want to interject here. When we set this up originally, this isn't what was discussed. There were some other issues that were discussed. This is not what was presented to me originally when we talked about this conference call.
What was presented? Because in the email that I sent, it was talking about the committee and how we could better position ourselves to free Dr. York.
Let's see. I'm checking the email that you sent me right now. Let's see. Okay. Okay, yeah. This is the email I had gotten from you. I think this was like this is November 9th. You were looking at, let's see, meeting request. Okay, now this is Near Fury Head, Secretary of the CCC of New York, the President of the Committee for the Purpose of Freedom of Malachi, New York. We've watched some of your videos, the one in which you were interviewed. We would love to meet with you or have a phone conference regarding what we can do to better position ourselves to Freedom Master Teacher. Would you please contact me as soon as possible? Towel Hat. When we had our preliminary discussion, I had stated this, I've always stated this when it got to a certain point regarding Malachi York's case, and I've stated that before, he's not in jail. And I don't believe that he is in jail. And if he is in jail for the sake of discussion, there's one big problem. There's a myriad of problems that have to be addressed. The first thing is, when you say the CCC, what does that stand for? I see Concerned Citizens. Does the C stand for committee?
Yes.
Okay, of New York City, right?
Of New York, yes.
Okay. Now, as a brother opened up, dealing with indigenous status, it's really indigenous standing and sovereignty, there's a problem, because if you're going to use commercial terms and corporate terms to identify yourself, you automatically fall under their jurisdiction, number one. So when you say Concerned Citizens of New York, are you talking about the state of New York, the Republic of New York? I need a definition of what is Concerned Citizens and what citizens of whom? Are citizens of the state of New York, the United States of America?
When we put the title together, it represented just being citizens of the state and city of New York.
Okay.
Now, we understood about that terminology with the word citizens, but that was done more so just, you use certain times where people, like for instance, you may say cavalry, but if you say that to certain people, they won't know you're talking about Africa. So even though you may know Africa has a meaning from the root word farika, which means to divide or separate, but if you didn't say Africa, most people wouldn't know what you were talking about.
I comprehend
that context.
And I accept that context for value and consideration for preservation of all my indigenous rights on Turtle Island. This is because we talked about this prior, and it was a valid point that has to be correct. We really have to start, and I harp on this, go to international committee meetings with international nations, and I harp on this a lot, that the problem is the definitions are what's trapping people. saying, okay, when I say New York, I look at it as Renanchqua or Kaskaskia, because any Mohawks, Iroquois, any of those Six Nations that are still residing from Manhattan all the way up to White Plains up in those areas, that's what they know as corporately called Manhattan. That's what they know it as. So when dealing with issues of indigenousness, you have to refer to the indigenous names due to the fact of the definitions that they're using are coming from United States Code, Black's Law Dictionary. Not so much as the Oxford or the Webster's, but when you're dealing with issues of court, which is a private trading company, all the courts are banks, for lack of a better word, they're banks. The judge is supposed to be sitting as a banker. So when we get into the issue of identifying yourself as concerned citizens of New York, now the impression is that New York City, being that it is a corporation, the first assumption is that the person who is on that committee is a U.S. citizen. Now, the definition under Title 28 of the United States Code, Section 3002, Paragraph 15, is dealing with the definition that the United States is a federal corporation. So, being that it's a federal corporation, anybody who's residing in any of the 50 quote-unquote states of the Union, they are actually looked upon as U.S. citizens that are residing in the states of the Union due to the fact that the United States is foreign with respect to the individual so-called quote-unquote 50 states. So when dealing with the case of Malachi Z. Yorkel, I have not talked to people. People have emailed me and they've wanted to discuss it, and I've said, look, he's not in jail. And if he is, y'all can't get him out because you're walking around calling yourselves citizens in African America. I got the court brief. Right? At this point, I'm going to say, after a quote, still pot. Begin all things by first using the all. The documents that Malachi Z. York had tendered to him by what was his name? I think it was Manny Aurora out of Atlanta. That had his lineage. No, it wasn't Manny Aurora. It was Garland. He was the one who did Malachi Z. Yorkel's lineage and pinpointed it, had it filed, everything. Put it to the court record. So the issue is that when it was brought forward of indigenous standing that he did on the record, the issue was they should have stopped the proceedings right then and there. And what happened was Aurora would have tendered that issue of indigenous to shut down the whole courthouse point. And that was a known fact that was in the transcripts. Plus, Action Ray said, what you guys have to do, Chief Black Eagle said, have to put me to the poorest Cherokee's court with all due respect to your court and to your court system. That's where he needed to go because of the lack of jurisdiction, and that's supported by Presidential Proclamation 7500, as well as House Joint Resolution 3, which was an apology from the U.S. Congress to Native Americans in American Indian. So I just want to lead off into that first. So if there's any question about what I've just said, let's deal with that, and we'll go through whatever else that you guys have want to ask.
Yeah.
Okay, well, first I would like to make a statement that if any time an improper terminology is used and needs to be corrected, or we need to be brought to that awareness of what the proper legal terminology is, etc., please interrupt and feel free to do so, because we're here to learn what needs to be done and I know a lot of that involves the proper terminology, the right paperwork, and etc. Now, there's one other situation with, I understand, excuse me, if you feel personally that Dr. Malachi B. York L. is not in prison, I would like to ask you to approach this in the question that we asked as if he is in prison, which I know that might not be an easy thing to do, but that's the way
I will accept that for value, honor, and consideration with full reservation of all my indigenous rights. I have no problem. I conditionally accept that.
I will have.
Okay. Well, a lot of what you said, for me personally, it kind of went over my head. There's certain things in there that I understood, but you went off into a lot of things, and I'm glad that we're recording this so we could go back over it. But the format that we had in mind, but I mean, I know you know this stuff a whole lot better than what we do. We just wanted to start off with some basic, if I could call off some words, and you give us the proper definition as far as legally for those terms, because people may think that it's something other than what it is, like lay people's terms. But I want you to give us the real definition for it.
Well, what I'd like to do is emphasize that I'm going to make this, I'm going to simplify this.
Okay.
Realize that the legal world, as they call it, legalese, consider it another language.
Mm-hmm.
But what they're using the English language as a code to speak to each other who comprehend that language. It's just like if we could go into the hood and talk to the hood talk, those same people, we could come bring them up, go to Morehouse or wherever, and all of a sudden, we'll definitely perfectly articulate ourselves to the full functionality of our God-given attributes, and then that'll lose people. But that's just to let you know, when they really want to hide something, they'll raise their level of communication so the lay person, as they call it, right, won't comprehend. So how do you combat that? It's no different than what everybody has been taught. You have to get what is the cipher language of definitions that they are using. And that is first, the cipher language is the Black's Law Dictionary.
Right.
Right? So so the Black's Law Dictionary, that is mandatory. And for the sake of this discussion, that was what was already told to New Wapian when Atum Ray put out the Family Tabernacle Family Guidebook. And he said, know who the sheriff is, who the judge is, who your congressman is, know who they are, know who the lawyers are, know who everybody in the environment that you're in is. And that was also stated on the video, and I want to make this so people who might be hearing this for the first time know, we did that video 7 years ago during the height of all that information and the cases and everything. And I will also impress upon people and let them know that myself and my wife, we were in the appeals court of Atlanta. We were in there. So this is not hearsay that I'm telling anybody anything. We were sitting in the court when Sean was sitting next to my wife and myself. So this is some people may be a shock from person that they've ever heard. So your basis is get yourself a Black's Law Dictionary, and if you have a Webster or an Oxford, and what you do when you compare the definition, what's said in English is not what is being said in English.
Wait, hold on. I hate to stop you, but your phone, it keeps going in and out. like I can't really hear.
Hold on, let me turn the volume up here a little bit.
Okay.
Is that better?
That's much better.
Okay. Black's Law Dictionary. That's to decipher language and get yourself an Oxford.
Okay, I have those. I have those. I just want to ask you, what is the best version to have? Because I have 1, 2, 5, and 8 of that. I have Bovier's Law Dictionary and something else that I have. Some type of collegiate dictionary.
All those are valid. Most people say the older the better, but it doesn't really kind of matter depending on who you're dealing with, as long as you have the dictionary, because some terms that are in the older dictionaries, they are not brought up into the newer versions, whereas in the newer versions, they'll classify whether the word is a noun, an adjective, a verb, etc. And the older versions don't have that.
Okay.
So the most important thing is, do you have the decipher language? Because you can always follow along later, right? I don't get caught up, and I tell people there's no need to get caught up in, well, this version's better, that version's better. The point of the matter is, do you got the decipher language? Do you have access to the decipher language? That's why they call it United States Code. There's no Constitution. There's United States Code.
Mm-hmm.
And what is a code? A code is specifically, I'm going to communicate something to you. I'm going to do it in such a way that only you and I will know what's going on. Whereas other people who see it, they'll think, oh, it's just whatever. It's just a symbol. It's just, you just said some words, and they don't comprehend the significance of why it's being said like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the reason why they call it the United States Code, because that's the code for the corporation.
Okay.
So when the subject of Malachi's LCD stuff, whether if you use New York with the word let in walk and the buck after 40. So,
excuse me, brother.
And yes.
You're fading out a little bit. Oh, quite a lot, really.
Yeah, well, that's them here. They're doing their best to be happy.
I know that.
I'm just telling you the real deal. I have a Ustream. We were going to do weekly Ustreams, and then all of a sudden when we did the Ustream, we were on for 90 minutes, and it kept saying record, and I couldn't see ourselves. So I said, well, I guess maybe it records you and puts it on afterward. You don't get to see yourself. So when we were done and put it up online, it was blank, 90 minutes of black.
Mm.
And the fortunate thing for us is we had a witness. We had a brother. There was a Roger Tariq Bates that we did after that. And we all, and when he did that, he talking with us while we were Ustreaming, and he confirmed on his show that when we did our Ustream, it came out all black.
Mm.
That's why when we it took us a while to get this conference call going, and I got on and I heard the Beatles playing. Oh, that's not a good sign. I said, the Beatles? Oh, that's what's online. They want to hear this.
Oh, God.
I'm just letting you guys know, this is not a thing of, we're going to get action around the jail, and life goes back, talking. No, you got the ISIS people. The ISIS people says that they are facing genetic violence. So because of them facing genetic violence, what do you think is going to happen? So to get actually these folks here in this saying? Not status that people corporation. He put you on the record while people walking around carrying U.S. contract. They belong to the corporation.
It's almost like every other word is going in and out now. How about we try this? How about I just hang up and I'll call you back directly and we won't do the conference line and see if that makes a difference.
Perfect.
Okay. All right, Hotep.
Entitled to operate here on that land, Turtle Island, Mulan. So that means it's a lie. So therefore, the prophet did what he did before they went and reorganized in 1933 under Public Law 89-719, making the United States Corporation, which was created under the Legislative Act of 1871, as a corporation. And so it dissolved it. So it was dissolved and it exists in name only on a one-dimensional piece of paper, the Phantom Zone, or the Matrix. So the problem again is, and then if you use the word black, black is not recognized internationally. Currently we've got people looking at the document that George Bush tendered in Geneva in Switzerland, where he said black people are a dead race and are not entitled to civil rights or any other kind of right. And that apparently is on the supposedly on the record. And I'm trying to get the document because once I can get my hands on that, I can show. And he's not wrong for saying it because they know our history in Europe as well as over here. But if you're calling yourself something your grandfathers and grandmothers never called themselves, then you automatically write yourself out of existence.
Mm-hmm.
So hence the reason issues of New York, Georgia, GA, you use those terms and you use those abbreviations, you're communicating and they're saying, you guys don't know what the heck you all are doing. You still are slaves because you're still using our terminology. You have to use the indigenous name of the landmass that you are on. This is the reason why you need a guide and somebody who has accomplished it. Our nation, we already have completed in Canada and the USS on file. We're listed as a stakeholder with the United Nations of the 103 stakeholders. We did a UPR report against the United States that's on file on the internet right now. So to go through a admiralty court, which is what the courts are, which are vessels in dry dock, in front of a Puerto Rican judge, because it's all operating, all the banks control the judges, it all operates offshore through Puerto Rico. And that's Title 48 U.S.C. Section 874. And it tells you that the court proceedings are not being done, I know U.S. Constitution, they're not even following their court rules, it's being done under the law of the people of Puerto Rico. So soon, that's why they fly the 50 star flag and the state flag outside the courthouse. In the courtroom, there's yellow fringes around them because that's signifying and advertising that your constitutional rights are suspended once in this room if you don't have a contract with the judge, so-called judge. Because there hasn't been a judiciary since 1789, and there haven't been any judges since 1789. They're only administrators. They only hear things pertaining to administration. They don't hear, the Supreme Court very rarely hears constitutional stuff because 99% of what's out there is administrative issues, not constitutional issues. So this comes, now we go back full circle. I filed a third-party intervenor document
before Chief Black Thunderbird Eagle, Chief Black Eagle, Malachi New York L, I filed it. The federal court in Atlanta wrote me because I was in Macon, as they called legal as TT or Asticata. I was there in the courtroom. They wrote me back before we got there, and they said, we do not accept third-party interveners, which is not true because the courts are supposed to be open to the public. This is before we realized that the courtroom is actually private banking companies. They're private trading companies. So when they wrote me back, they said, however, we don't take third-party interveners. However, what we will do is we will forward this document over to the attorney of record, Adrian Lopez Patrick. So when we got to Atlanta for the appeals hearing, we were waiting at the elevator, and interestingly enough, Adrian was behind us. My wife saw him. I didn't see him. I was concentrating on getting upstairs and getting a spot in there so we could sit down, and if need be, I would interject. What happened was my wife saw him sit there, and I just said, greetings, how you doing? He said, hi. And then we're waiting, and then all of a sudden he realized I'm the one that sent the document. Him and his crew take the long, winding staircase up to the second floor. So Adrian is a British accredited registry agent of the Queen. He's also more than likely Boule and is probably in a fraternity. So there is your next problem. He can't turn around and do legal procedures or processes that are contrary to the court's way of looking at it, because that will automatically put him against the system. He could get disbarred and kicked out. That's the end of his career. So what happened was, when he was in court, and I'll state this again, and this is one of the reasons why I hope this is going to get disseminated, not to sit there amongst, because I don't like that. That's the biggest problem, because information is being given that can fix and rectify stuff, and it's not getting out to the people for them to say, what? Or they say, oh, this is it? They don't have to believe anything. They can research it, but the evidence and information of what's happening is there. So Adrian turned around in the courtroom in Atlanta. He didn't bring up Malachi New York LP indigenous or tribal, or the fact that the government has no jurisdiction over him. All he said was Malachi New York L should not have gotten 135 years. He should have only gotten 15. Now, all the information that Garland has had in Atlanta, and I'm sure they had to turn the file.
Wait, hold on 1 minute. You have to turn that down in the background, because the feedback is just atrocious.
Is that better?
Somebody say something? I just heard it myself. I heard it myself. It's the background noise coming when either me or Nanya Shaabu speaks. Chief Nanya Shaabu. I'm sorry.
Do you hear it now?
Let me see. No, I don't hear it now. That's much better.
All right.
Okay. Continue.
Okay. So he said he shouldn't have gotten 135. He should have got 15. Now, that's what he said in court on the record. Now, here's where they did the bait and switch on all the Nubians. When Adrian Patrick came out the courtroom and they had the cameras, and I know the brother who operated one of the cameras because he used to live with me down in Asticata. Right? That's Nanya Yafsuf L. He was holding the camera, him and another sister. And Adrian said, we think the case is going very well. They have the court doesn't have any jurisdiction over him. He talked about that and indigenous and tribal outside the courtroom on the street. But he never said what he said in the camera in the courtroom where he was
under ineffective counsel, which would be at 25, Title 28 U.S.C. 2255 for ineffective assistance of counsel. Because why would you, and I know he had to give all the information that the Garland group gave him from Atlanta, and he had to look that over. Then he goes in the appeal and doesn't talk about indigenousness or tribal, which contradicts the Constitution, if that's what they're saying, because it says treaties, this Constitution and treaties are the supreme law of the land. So since us as Yamasee, regardless of which nation or which tribe or whatever, never signed any contract or treaties with the United States government, that automatically makes them have no jurisdiction. And him as a lawyer, he knew that. Adrian Patrick, he knew that. So the thing is, why would you turn around in court and say one thing and then come out in front of the cameras and say the next thing and have everybody going? And then meanwhile, Chief Black Eagle is writing Nubians and telling them, drain, trick. He was telling people that he's leading you all, and that's what attorneys do. If you're going to use them, you have to know, this is why, I can't stress this enough. If a person is not specialized or doesn't have experience or doesn't know, they should shut them out, sit down, and say, look, this person knows, have them guide you into whatever process that you're doing. Because using the attorney wasn't entirely bad if you would have issued a letter of rogatory. And that's an admiralty procedure whereby you're directing the attorney in writing, this is specifically what I want you to do. If they will not do it, you also put there a caveat, which is a warning, that if you don't do this, refuse to do it, or are unable to do it, you're hereby fired. Then at that point, what happens is you end up becoming, because I went through the same thing, because when you guys had sent me the email, they had kidnapped me up here 5 months ago, which so happened to be on the 19th of June. And that particular date up here is what they call Canada, but it's known corporately, but we call it Northern Turtle Island, the area of Papash, which is known as Treaty 6 territory. And that extends from the Banff Rocky Mountains right near Idaho all the way over to Montana, which is around South Dakota. So that week happened to be the week of the National Aboriginal Week, and then the day they kidnapped me was National Aboriginal Day. And I found it kind of interesting what the deal was, and then I ended up finding out later on that there were some significant events in Aboriginal history that coincided with that, plus the fact that 19th was a spiritual day for me. So they came on a spiritual day when they did the kidnapping. Mm-hmm. So I say that to say that, and because I happen to be in the center, which I knew this, and I couldn't find the book for the Bahamas, and then I finally got it last week, the Luciferian Conspiracy. And this was incidentally, or non-coincidentally, a book written by Malachi called The Luciferian Conspiracy. And on page 1, the catchword is Alberta, a province of Western Canada between British Columbia and Saskatchewan, where the myth that Freemasonry and Shrinery are European institutions that began under one called Alberta's Magnet. So further on page 2, it says the ancient Arabic